missing Casey today. He unavoidably couldn't be here, so we're going to push on, and we'll start with part 2. This is sponsored by Ink Kitchen. And so I'll hand it over to Tom, and I actually get to stay on the screen today. All right.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. If you missed our webinar earlier this week, we talked about the parts and pieces of graphic apparel design. So identifying the various components that go into building an apparel product. Today, we're going to talk about process and priorities. And really kind of what that means is examining the various priorities that would take precedent in helping to build the overall product and helping direct the process. So Ray, go ahead to slide number 1, if you would. So aesthetic priority is numero uno, of course. It's paramount. The best example I can give here is if you're working with brands. So creating a design that's on brand takes a true understanding of the brand or customer, and ultimately a dedication to making sure that every decision that's made is in line with keeping the product on brand. So every decision regarding the various components that go into your design are going to be driven by maintaining that dedication to the brand. I'll give just a couple of really simple examples, Ray, if you can go to the next slide. Here's a brand that most people know and have an understanding of, Patagonia. The obvious, to simplify and boil down the aesthetic, I would say that it's very soft and earthy. They're the socially conscious operation, environmentally driven. So the obvious design components that you'd see here, you're working with organic fibers, soft fabrics, soft inks, and subtle and distressed graphics. Very, very basic, and very much in line with the brand aesthetic. We can contrast that with another great brand, Academics, which is extremely bold. Urban is how I would describe the aesthetic. You're working with heavier fabrics, heavier inks, much more technical on the graphic side, utilizing technologies of direct screen print, transfer, heavy appliques. I hope that kind of illustrates, that's a pretty good, 2 obvious examples of 2 very different brands that both have a very, very strong aesthetic. And you could see how your decision making from the blanks that you're working with, all the materials, it's going to be directed by that aesthetic. I think that that it would be all of the decisions that you're making would be driven by that strong brand that's been built over many, many years for both of these brands.
Yeah, I've found that in our side, on the ink side, that people have different descriptions to what they want, and they may say soft when they actually mean smooth, or they may, yeah. And so, I mean, how do you get around that when you start setting customers' expectations? I mean,
I deal with that a ton with a lot of bands, right? So for band merchandise, we'll get a lot of metal bands that have like a crazy simulation on a black t-shirt. And a lot of times they want it soft feel. And I have to start that dialogue back with them where I'm like, hey, like printing this with plastisol is going to give you that kind of depth and pop that you want, because their logos are always a giant solid area logo and then subtle kind of painted style imagery on the shirt. So you need that kind of blend, and I'm always trying to just let them know, it's like, well, the simulation itself 9 times out of 10 is going to have a smooth, soft feel to it, but you do want that kind of pop, and you do want that hand to your logo, and we end up just leading them back to like a standard plastisol print.
Yeah. So if you could go to the next slide, Ray. Cost priority would be second only to the aesthetic priority. The products that we're designing have to obviously work in the real world. They have to fit within a budget. You have to work as a graphic apparel designer. You have to work with sales staff and your customer in making these component decisions to make sure that that the product on a per unit basis fits within a budget, whether it's for promotion or for profit, for resale. It's a very, very important job. Obviously, we'd love to have no budgets and to be able to design, to our wildest imagination. But we do live in the real world, and so when you're working within that framework, then it kind of directs your decisions. If you can go to the next slide, Ray, I'll give a couple examples of designs for a very specific. Well, I guess we could call it a brand at this point after this many years, maybe. So we have a very, very complex design here with an all-over graphic, multiple placements. There's an all-over graphic with a foil print, a woven patch, and an additional location on the sleeve on a premium blank, high-end blank. This is obviously a very effective design. It would also be very, very expensive to reproduce. If you go to the next slide, we have something that's obviously quite a bit toned down. We would be working with a very cost-effective, high quality, but cost-effective blank, utilizing a classic, bold, simple graphic. We've added some distressing on to create a vintage effect. That doesn't cost anything. This too is a very, very effective design, given what the purpose is. And obviously, we're talking about a specific brand here, but you could apply this to a corporation, to anything, that you can still create something that's very effective within a budget.
So this part of it, I mean, really, it's like we're artists, but we're also owners, or we're artists, we're also our own salesmen, things like that. Do you have, when you're approached with something like that first design, do you have like a itemized cost ad or something like that when you're talking to the customer? How do you get around that? Again, customer expectations.
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is something that we actually built. But yeah, I mean, a lot of customers will come to you with things, with design concepts that are way beyond this, that are not even reproducible oftentimes. Yeah. A lot of times that's the first conversation that you're having, is we have to work within reality of what could actually be produced, when working with finished blank products, if you're not doing cut and sew, obviously your options would be expanded. But yeah, customers come to you with all sorts of wacky ideas, and then understanding, getting to understand what their budget is or what their target, price per unit is. You can help them make decisions to still get impact while lowering the cost. And that is a really crucial part of our job. And again, the same would apply, just to reiterate, the same applies for, I worked for years with some of the largest corporations. You can imagine, tech companies, Adobe, Facebook, Apple. It all applies. It's very much the same thing. And they come to you with really wild concepts, and you have to kind of turn it into reality, but within their budget. So there's a lot that goes into that.